I'll never forget the expression on Karen Pembroke's face the morning she strutted into that courtroom. Her bleached blonde hair was sculpted into perfection, her designer handbag swinging like a badge of superiority. She clutched her lawsuit papers as if they were a golden ticket, already rehearsing the smug speech she'd deliver at the next HOA meeting about how she'd finally put me in my place. The woman who had turned my life into a waking nightmare for months thought she was about to win. But what Karen didn't know was that I had my own stack of papers tucked safely in my briefcase, documents so damning, so absurdly ironic, that when she finally saw them, her grin would curdle into slack-jawed disbelief. Because Karen Pembroke, self-crowned dictator of the Maple Grove HOA, had built her house on my land. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back 6 months, to the day I made the mistake of stepping into her domain. The realtor had called it a unique opportunity in the historic Maple Grove subdivision, a corner lot at Elm Street and 2nd Avenue, empty on the market for nearly a year. I should have asked why. The price was decent, the commute manageable, and the 1960s ranch house, while dated, had good bones. It felt like a fresh start. What could go wrong? I found out the very next day. I was still unpacking when an aggressive pounding rattled my front door. Standing on the porch was a woman in her early 50s, dressed what could only be described as suburban battle armor. Khakis pressed razor-sharp, a button-down embroidered with the HOA logo, and a clipboard she wielded like a sword. "I'm Karen Pembroke," she announced, not bothering with introductions. "President of the Maple Grove Homeowners Association. We need to discuss several violations I've already observed." Violations? I hadn't even unpacked my living room yet. Karen rattled them off with glee. My moving truck had exceeded the 2-hour parking limit. My grass was a 1/4 inch above regulation height, and the mailbox left by the previous owner wasn't HOA approved. She handed me a packet of fines totaling $300, smiled without warmth, and snapped, "Welcome to the neighborhood." Then she marched back to her house, directly behind mine. That was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Karen's visits became routine harassment. She fined me for owning a garden hose the wrong color. She measured the gap between my trash cans. She slapped me with violations because my new blinds were off-white instead of pure white. The breaking point came with a certified letter demanding $2,400 in back dues and late fees. Apparently, the previous owner had stopped paying, and now I was responsible. When I tried to protest, Karen appeared on my porch, arms crossed like a prison warden. "There's nothing to review," she snapped. "Every homeowner pays dues. It's not optional. Refuse, and I'll place a lien on your property." That night, I spread my closing documents across the dining room table, determined to make sense of it all. Deed, title report, survey. Things I'd barely skimmed at the time. And then I saw it. Tucked within the deed was a land lease agreement, dated July 15th, 1973. It wasn't just for my corner lot. It included a lease strip of land stretching beyond my boundary, paid in full for 99 years as part of some long-forgotten development deal. Curious, I dug deeper into the county's online archives. When I found the original survey maps, I had to sit down. The lease didn't cover just an empty strip of grass. It swallowed a significant piece of the lot next door, Karen's lot. The next morning, I drove to the county recorder's office, where a kindly clerk named Harold, who'd worked there 30 years, helped me piece together the rest of the story. Back in the 1970s, a developer had owned several parcels of land that would eventually become Maple Grove. To fund his dream, he created a patchwork of creative property arrangements, long-term leases, odd boundaries, legal shortcuts. "Oh, I remember this mess," Harold muttered, adjusting his glasses as he pored over the dusty documents. There was a huge dispute back in the 80s. The developer went bankrupt. Everything was sold off in pieces, and no one ever untangled those old leases. The city just forgot about them. Forgotten by the city, but not gone. According to the records, when Karen's house had been built in 1991, part of it, nearly 20 feet of her backyard, even a section of the structure itself, sat squarely on land covered by my lease. Land I controlled. Armed with this revelation, I took everything to a real estate attorney named David Lawson. He spent 2 weeks dissecting the documents before delivering the verdict. "The lease is valid," he said at last, tapping the pages. "Legally binding. Karen Pembroke has been trespassing for over 30 years. Technically, you could demand rent or even force her to remove the encroaching portion of her house. I didn't want to destroy someone's home, but I did want Karen's harassment to stop. So when she sent yet another letter, this time demanding $3,000 in back dues and penalties, I decided it was time to strike back. David drafted a letter of our own, explaining that my property was exempt from HOA membership due to its unique legal status. Almost casually, we also noted boundary issues that would need to be addressed. Karen's response was explosive. She appeared on my doorstep within 24 hours, face flushed crimson, waving our letter like it was a personal insult. "How dare you try to weasel out of your obligations with some made-up technicality?" she screamed. "I don't care what some lazy lawyer told you. You live in Maple Grove. You pay dues like everyone else." I stayed calm, which only made her angrier. "Karen," I said evenly, "have your attorney review the documents. This isn't a technicality. It's legal reality." Her eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that. I'm filing a lawsuit first thing Monday morning. And when I'm finished, you'll be paying every cent in dues, plus every cent in legal fees." True to her word, I was served the following week. Karen was suing me for unpaid dues, late fees, legal costs, and, bizarrely, for intentional infliction of emotional distress upon the HOA board. Her demand? Over $10,000. David and I prepared our counterstrike carefully. We didn't show our full hand. Our initial response requested dismissal, reiterating my exemption. But then we filed a counterclaim, trespassing and unjust enrichment, for Karen's unauthorized use of my leased land. When Karen's attorney, a young man named Bradley Morrison, received the counterclaim and property documents, the change was immediate. Within 2 days, he was on the phone with David. "I don't think my client fully understood the situation," Bradley admitted, his voice cautious. "Perhaps we can resolve this matter without further litigation." But Karen refused to yield. At the settlement conference, she sat across from me, arms folded tight, glaring as though I'd insulted her entire family. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I've lived in that house for 20 years. You can't just waltz in with some old piece of paper and claim my property." David laid out the evidence, the deed, the lease agreement, the surveys, the county records. Bradley's face drained of color with every page. "Mrs. Pembroke," he said softly, "these documents appear legitimate. Your house is, in fact, partially on land leased to Mr. Thompson. Then the documents are wrong." Karen barked. "This is fraud." The mediator, a retired judge named Patricia Chun, adjusted her glasses and spoke with deliberate weight. "Mrs. Pembroke, I have seen countless property disputes. These documents are authentic, properly recorded, and enforceable. You would be wise to consider settlement." Karen bolted from the room, vowing she'd rather go to court than give me a penny. Bradley chased after her, whispering frantic pleas as they disappeared down the hall. 3 months later, we finally had our day in court. Karen swept into the courtroom as though it were her personal stage. She wore her sharpest suit, her HOA president's pin gleaming like a medal, and settled at the plaintiff's table with a flourish of papers. Every so often, she shot me venomous glares, as if sheer willpower alone could bend the trial in her favor. At the bench sat Judge Robert Hamilton, a stern man in his 60s with eyes that missed nothing. He read through the files with an expression that promised no patience for theatrics. Karen's attorney went first. His argument was polished but thin, painting me as a delinquent homeowner hiding behind technicalities to shirk my obligations. It sounded convincing enough until it was our turn. David rose calmly and dismantled their case piece by piece. He laid out the history, how my property predated the HOA, how the lease agreement explicitly exempted it from future associations, and finally, the revelation that shattered Karen's smug composure. Her house, the very headquarters of her reign, sat on land I legally controlled. The judge studied the survey maps, cross-referencing them against satellite images on his laptop. The silence in the courtroom was electric, broken only by the faint shuffle of papers. "Let me be clear," Judge Hamilton said finally, his voice deliberate. Mrs. Pembroke's home, the same residence from which she conducts HOA business, is partially built on land leased to Mr. Thompson? That is correct, Your Honor, David confirmed. The judge turned his gaze on Karen. Mrs. Pembroke, were you aware of this when you purchased your home? Her face drained from red to ashen white. And no, Your Honor, this is the first I'm hearing of it. And yet, the judge continued, you have spent 30 years issuing fines, collecting dues, and enforcing rules from a house that encroaches on your neighbor's property. The HOA was established legally. Karen sputtered, we have documentation. Documentation. Judge Hamilton cut in, that does not override pre-existing property rights. He spent 10 more minutes reviewing the evidence before delivering his verdict. I find in favor of the defendant, Mr. Thompson. His property is exempt from HOA membership. The plaintiff's claims are dismissed with prejudice. Karen's jaw dropped, but the judge wasn't finished. Regarding the counterclaim, Mrs. Pembroke has indeed been unjustly enriched by the unauthorized use of Mr. Thompson's lease land. I will not order demolition of the structure, given the time elapsed. However, I am ordering Mrs. Pembroke to pay fair market rent. He calculated swiftly, his pen scratching across the pad. Mrs. Pembroke, you'll pay $18,000 in back rent for the past 3 years, the statute of limitations. In addition, you will pay $400 monthly going forward, with adjustments for inflation. Karen shot to her feet, knocking her chair backward. This is outrageous. I'm not paying rent on my own property. The judge's gavel struck like a gunshot. It is not your property, Mrs. Pembroke, and I strongly advise you to watch your tone. You should be grateful Mr. Thompson has not demanded removal of the encroaching structure. He leaned forward, his voice colder now. And one more thing. Your campaign of harassment against Mr. Thompson ends today. Any further spurious fines or intimidation will be treated as contempt of this court. Do I make myself clear? Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked to her attorney for rescue, but he was already packing his briefcase in silent defeat. When court adjourned, I caught a glimpse of her in the hallway, frantically hissing into her phone, "Emergency board meeting tonight." No, it can't wait until Tuesday. 2 weeks later, 2 letters arrived. The first was from her attorney, a check for $18,000, along with a signed rental agreement for the land use. The second came from a Maple Grove HOA. Karen Pembroke had resigned as president effective immediately. The neighbors confirmed what I suspected. The board had ousted her after the embarrassment she brought upon them. The iron-fisted queen of Maple Grove was now the neighborhood pariah, whispered about with ridicule instead of fear. 6 months later, I saw the final blow. A moving truck parked in front of Karen's house. She couldn't stand it. The rent payments, the humiliation, the constant reminder that the man she tried to break had crushed her instead. She sold the house at a steep loss, forced to disclose the land lease issued to every potential buyer. The new owners, the Johnstons, turned out to be a kind young couple. They pay their lease fee without complaint, and we've already shared drinks at their housewarming. As for Karen, rumor has it she moved across town to a development without an HOA. Every January, when the rent check clears, I think back to that courtroom. The day Karen Pembroke finally learned that sometimes the ground beneath your feet doesn't belong to you